Welcome to the Business of Apparel podcast. This is the place to learn how to start and scale your own apparel brand and fill it with loyal customers for years to come. I'm your host, Rachel Erickson, owner and CEO of Unmarked Street. I can't wait to share this episode with you. Welcome back to the Business of Apparel podcast. I am really excited for today's guest because Jessica Kuczek is someone who is just really talented, really generous, and I have had the extreme pleasure of getting the chance to work with her every week over the last year now. Has it been a year? Through working with Unmarked Street as an independent contractor. And so I wanted to give her the chance to just kind of talk a little bit about herself today and give you the chance to get to know her. So if you're ever talking to Unmarked Street about anything that we could do for you, just know that Jessica is one of the amazing people kind of behind the scenes doing a lot of the amazing work. And welcome, Jessica. I'm so excited to have you today.
I'm excited to be here.
Yay. So let's just start a little bit with your background. I know you kind of started in corporate similar to me. If you wouldn't mind just kind of walking through a little bit of what you've done in your career up until kind of becoming an independent contractor and the roles that you've kind of held.
Yeah, so I've been doing this just over a decade. I got a little late start in my career because I decided to pursue fashion design a little bit later. My first job was a corporate job. I worked for a company called Knights Apparel, which is now a part of Hanes. I started out as a technical designer doing sports licensed apparel. So it was pretty cool. It's a really different part of the fashion industry because you're working with, sports teams and sports apparel. And so they have very strict rules about how they want the art to look, what colors you can use. But it was a great first step into the industry. I learned so much and I had the opportunity to work on basically all kinds of different apparel and products. So it was kind of a great first step. I got to learn a lot.
It's really interesting. I love that part of your story because it's also how I started my career. My first internship that I ever had was for a licensing company, but we licensed out cartoon characters. So instead of sports teams, I was working with the SpongeBob SquarePants team and the Care Bears team. And I think we did some Disney stuff too. But to your point, there is so much to learn about standards and what you can do and fitting inside this tight little box of how we can create product. I'm curious, did you do a lot of graphic design while you were doing sports licensing, or was it still very technical designy?
I was pretty strictly technical design. We had a team of artists who focused on the graphic portion, and we would kind of guide them to what we wanted things to look like. But basically, they did their thing, and we were pretty focused on the technical side.
Perfect. Yeah. I remember our technical design person when I had that job and thinking that is such a cool job. I want to do that someday. But yeah, that's so cool. So you were that cool person at that place.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was pretty cool. It's I think a job that people don't really think about very often when they think about apparel and fashion design. You think about the artwork and you think about fashion designers who are coming up with these creative ideas, but you don't really think about the people who are translating those ideas into an actual product that people can use.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? Whenever people ask me what I do, family or friends, and it's hard for me to explain, I'm always well, if you think about engineering for any other product, I'm an apparel engineer kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Very cool.
It's pretty cool.
So where'd you head after Knights Apparel?
After Knights Apparel, I took a position in Miami at Isako International, which is no longer around anymore, but they did men's underwear and sleepwear. It was kind of the main products that I worked on. So I had I think 5 private label brands. One brand, Perry Ellis, I think is pretty familiar with people. Yeah. So that was different. It was the first time I did not do anything that was licensed. So it was all, we had a team of designers who were really creating everything from scratch. And so that was pretty cool. It was really different, but it's like a whole other side of the
Mhm.
business with way less rules and restrictions,
Yes.
but it
But
was
you have to
really
like
fun.
learn
Yeah.
your own rules and restrictions, I think, as a technical designer in that space. And so I'm guessing you honed a lot of those skills of figuring out like what works and what doesn't, and what do you kind of need to advise the designers on.
Yeah, and I got to kind of move out of like strictly technical design there and into more of like a true product development role
Cool.
where, I was working more in getting the product developed from the beginning. It was less taking someone else's idea and figuring out how to engineer
Yeah.
that, like you said, and more like helping to figure out what the ideas were and what we needed, talking to buyers. So
That's cool.
it gave me a little different perspective on the industry too.
Yeah, it's amazing how some of these roles evolve, and like depending on what company you're at, how different it can be from like developer to technical designer and anything kind of in between, and they throw a lot at you.
Yeah, and every company kind of has like a different definition of what each role does and
Yes.
what that entails. And you might be a product developer and a technical
Mhm.
designer and the designer at some places. Other places you might just be working strictly on like one little piece of it. So
Yep.
it's pretty crazy in apparel, but it's cool to be a developer.
Yeah. Yeah, I would totally agree. And so after a while, you decided to leave corporate and become an independent contractor. And I've been talking about my experience, moving from corporate to independent contracting and just how different it is, and the good parts and the bad parts and all of the in betweens. But I'd love to get your perspective too, and just like, what are the great things about being an independent contractor now, and what are some of the toughest things?
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay. I would say some of my favorite parts, the flexibility.
Mm. Yes,
You really
absolutely.
create your own schedule. You work when you want to, which is great. But also, you get to work with a lot of different people
Yep.
and in a lot of different roles, which can be frustrating sometimes, a little overwhelming because you kind of got to wear all the
Yep.
hats. But you get to do so many different things with so many cool people, work on like all kinds of different
Mhm.
products. And that's kind of probably the best part is just kind of getting to dip your toes in a little bit of
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say, are there any bad parts about kind of coming in and being an independent contractor now that you've been doing it for a little while?
um, there's a bit less job security there.
Sure.
So I would say that's probably the main
100%
downside is
agreed.
that
Yes. It's a hustle every
you
day.
have yeah, and you have some clients who want to work with you forever and they trust you and you're the person they call, and you have other clients who just want to work with you for one
Mhm.
project and then you're done, and then it's like, okay, well, I still need to work,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you got to find
Who's the
somebody
next
else to work
person who
with.
has a project? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Definitely.
but I mean, other than that, it really opens things up a lot more than working corporate. There's less rules, less restrictions. You kind of get to be your own boss in a way, which is nice, and you get to avoid office
Yeah.
politics, which I love.
Yeah. I would say that's one of the big things for me. And as I even like look back on it now, or like watching friends or family like kind of deal with corporate office politics and like listening to their stories or whatever, I'm just like, why? Like why do they do that? And how was I ever a part of that? It just sounds so crazy. So it is kind of mind-boggling like how like being out on your own and doing freelancing kind of frees you from all of that almost nonsense
Yeah.
that people get into every day.
Yeah, it's honestly like relieved quite a bit of stress for me. But, we've talked about, like, I think we both kind of have experienced some like toxic work
Yep.
cultures. And so that's what I left when I started working with you. And it's just such a load off to be able to, take a breath, not have to deal with that for a while, and,
Yeah.
just be able to get back to the work and the part of it that I enjoy.
Yeah. That's amazing. Speaking of what you enjoy, I think one of my most impressive things about you that I love is that you are so diverse. You know, you can come in and lend design help if we need a client who's designing something. You build the most beautiful tech packs I think I've ever seen in the entire industry. You can do fittings, and you've like mastered remote fittings with me as we've kind of started to do a lot of those more and more. What is your favorite part of all of it? Like when it really comes down to it and you're like, oh, I really can't wait to get into this. What is your favorite part of all the contracting and all the work?
Well, I have two
Okay.
favorites. So I would say my number one favorite thing, and this is just working in apparel in general, is getting to see the product
Mhm.
that you've worked on, getting to see it like on the shelves and out in the wild and being like, yeah, I did that.
Yes.
I helped make that possible. That's like my number one. My second favorite thing is getting to learn new things and kind of grow my knowledge in the industry. I love, learning new techniques, learning new programs, just learning how to do things better and improve myself. It's kind of cheesy, but I love learning.
I think that is like crucial as a freelancer or contractor or someone who's like, you're an entrepreneur, right? Like you're out there doing your own thing, building your own stuff, building your own like personal brand. I think that's like super important to want to continue learning as an entrepreneur. Otherwise, you're going to just kind of stay stagnant. So that's huge. I don't think it's cheesy at all.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely one of those people. If I could just go to school and
The
be a
same
scholar,
way. I
that's
told
where.
someone that the other day. I was like, you wouldn't even have to pay me. I would just go back to college for the rest of my life.
Yeah, as long as I could, just like live comfortably and then just learn
Yeah.
stuff. I love it.
Yeah. I'm the same way. And I actually
Yeah.
get myself in trouble because I decided to take on these like big learning opportunities. Like I'm going to get certified in this, or I'm going to go get this license. And then it's like a ton of my time and resources going toward that thing that I'm trying to learn instead of like running the business. But I totally feel you there.
Yeah,
I saw recently you got a certification in Clo 3D. Is that right?
I
That's
did.
awesome. What did you think about Clo?
I love it. It's so cool. It's so fun. You can do so much
Mhm.
with it,
Yeah.
and it makes a lot of the development process so much easier.
Yeah.
You can manipulate patterns. You can try your clothing on a body. You can adjust it on that body. I love it.
Yeah.
It was so fun.
I love to see that you did that because I remember when you came to Unmarked Street and we were talking at first, one of the things you told me was like, don't super dig patterns. And so when I saw that you were getting into Clo 3D, I was like, I should have suggested that to her because I played in Clo 3D a little bit too, and it's such a different way of working on patterns. It like takes, I don't know, it takes the rigidity out of pattern engineering the way that it traditionally is done. And I feel like it kind of
Yeah.
put it back into creative hands. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, it especially like if you're a visual learner, it's just such a better way of seeing like how the patterns lay out, and then you can put it on a form and see like why it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense or why it does work and what you need to adjust it so much more easily than if you're drawing a paper pattern on the table, or even drawing a pattern in a patterning program. It just gives you that like extra visual aid to make sure you're doing it right. And I think like as a technical designer, I know like a lot of people like me, they got to touch it and see it on the body and know like, where the creases
Yep.
are, and Clo lets you do that,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
I think it really lends into the whole like remote fitting kind of scenario that I think a lot of the industry, well, not a lot of the industry, I will say, and I'm just going to kind of interject here with a little bit of an anecdote, but I feel like there's a huge segment of our industry that is adamant that remote fittings and 3D fittings are never going to be a thing. Like we always have to be together in a room. We always have to feel and touch the product. We always have to be right there with our fit model, doing the pinning and all of that stuff. And then I think there's another segment of our industry that's moving forward with like, how do we revolutionize this so that we can review, fittings on a 3D avatar first before we're actually seeing a physical sample? And then also like, how do we do things from different places all over the world. Like, how do we run a fitting? Like, you're in Michigan, I'm in California. We had a fitting the other day that I'd love for you to just kind of talk through how we did it. But I think that that is kind of the future because, and I hate to sound like really negative and downside here, but I don't think the COVID-19 pandemic is the last one we're ever going to have. And I think being able to move forward in a way that allows us to continue learning outside of the box and not all need to be in the same room together is the way that most industries are going to have to go. So as we've been working on a lot of remote fittings, I'd love to just kind of, if we can just kind of chat through so the audience can kind of hear some of the challenges that we've had in remote fittings and some of the great things about it too. What are some of your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I will say definitely one of the benefits I've seen as someone who sat in a lot of fittings, virtual kind of takes the element of like nitpicking and overthinking the product out of it.
That's such a good point.
I think like, yeah, when you're in a room with a ton of people, everyone has an opinion and there's always some tweak, and so much of it is totally unnecessary. It doesn't affect the fit. It's just personal preference. And virtual fittings take so much of that out of it, and it makes it just a much smoother process. You get to discuss, you're getting down to the nitty gritty of what is actually the issue with the garments, because usually like you're not going to sit on a 2-hour call to do a fitting.
Right.
You want to get through it. You don't want to waste anybody's time. But when you're in the office, it's kind of like, the meetings can drag on forever if you let them.
Yes.
So that's definitely a pro I've seen for virtual fittings.
I think that's such a good point. And I haven't even thought of that as such a pro, but it's so true. And I'll let you go into like anything else that you want to add there. But remind me that really reminds me of the Simply Be project that we did. So let's come back to that.
Yeah. And I would say, I guess the other benefits of the virtual fitting is you have the people in the room that really need to be looking at this product. You don't have a lot of extra people there. You can really get down to like what you need to correct there. And you mentioned our fitting this week, which we had our little 3-person fitting. Yeah. I tried the clothes on myself, so that was actually great because I'm the expert on the fit in the room. So I can look at it on me and know exactly what needs to change. I don't have to go through a whole lot of like guessing and figuring it out. Like I can see exactly the problem and fix it.
Yeah. Well, I think that speaks to, and I also love doing the same thing. Like if I can fit on myself these days and be the fit model while being like the technical designer in the room, I find a lot of value in that because I don't have to try to pull out of a fit model, like, how does it feel? Where is it weird? Like, what would you fix? What would you prefer to have? Like, I can feel that and lend all of that advice like immediately.
Yeah.
And I was able to see that with you this week. So that was very cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it depends on who you're working with and who's fitting. There's definitely times where, we've been in fittings where there's a model trying it on and the person there has no idea.
Yeah.
So they're just kind of relaying what they can to us. But even in those instances, like having 2 experts in the room, like we're used to having people who don't really know how to explain it try to tell us what's wrong with a garment.
Yeah.
So, we can kind of work together and translate that, and it still seems to go a bit smoother than a lot of the fittings I've had in person.
I think so too. And I think, I've been kind of touting this like fit checklist that I developed like 10 years ago in my career. And it's something that you can download from the Unmarked Street website for free. Jessica actually helped to judge that and actually make it look beautiful. But that is also kind of ingrained in my brain, I feel like, where like going through that fit checklist and making sure we're covering all of the right questions and like really getting those people who might not be in the actual room, who know all of the stuff, we can still ask the right questions to get enough information out of them. And that brings me back to the Simply Be project, which we did have. So Jen is our other independent contractor at Unmarked Street, and Jen was in the room, and she's also an amazing technical designer. So that was great to be able to have her in the room through doing virtual fittings and being able to kind of communicate all of that together. I feel like we accomplished something ridiculous. Like we were able to help them launch a brand new line from scratch to launch in what, 6 months? I don't know if I've ever
It
seen
was
that
crazy.
before.
Yeah, it was so fast.
Yeah, you were a huge champion during that project. I'd love to like just have you kind of put your opinion down like how did we do that?
I think it was really a lot of good
Mm,
communication and making sure that like we were all on the same page. We were really um we really made sure that the clients were getting us just clearly telling us what they wanted
yeah,
and making sure that, if we could, we were hitting that on the first try.
yeah,
Um, because there were definitely some hiccups on the project. So we had some stressors there, and I think there always are. But just making sure that we talked things through, we were all on the same page. It just really speeds the process up when everybody knows what's going on and what they need to be doing to push things forward.
yeah. And I think this is maybe a good like public safety announcement to say that like the project honestly made me really nervous because they wanted to launch really fast. And I've never seen, and I've been talking about this a lot, I've never seen product launch from like scratch. Like this is a brand new design. I just thought this up. I've got it like sketched in pencil on a piece of paper to
Yeah.
launch date. I've never seen that done in less than 9 months. And so for us
Yeah.
to take on this project, I was really blown away by you and your communication style. And like there was a little bit, I think, of confusion when we got in our first prototypes. And I just kind of want to say to the audience here, and like, first prototypes are never going to be perfect. I think we've seen a lot of instances where they're getting close. Like, we're getting to a point where we're getting a lot of first protos really close. But when you're working with a team who really understands how to run a fitting, how to communicate with a factory, going from a really crappy first proto to an almost done immaculate second proto is possible. And I think we really proved
Mhm.
that. I think with Simply Be, you did an amazing job just with comments and working with their pattern maker on that.
Yeah, I'm definitely a bit of an over communicator, but I feel like, some that never hurts. It never hurts to
Yeah.
over communicate. Just make sure that everyone's clear on what's needed. And, I think a lot of times people see a first proto, and when it's not right, it's scary because you don't know how many more samples you're going to need. And is it a huge problem? Is it a small problem? I think we were pretty lucky, that those protos really, they looked like they needed more work than they really did, and a lot
Yeah.
of the fixes were pretty small, and it just made that enough of a difference to turn a product from like what is going on to like wow.
Yes, I totally agreed. And I think, I've seen a couple of different kind of posts out on Instagram recently talking about this same thing. Like, you should never really bank on your first proto coming in looking immaculate. But if you have a great team and you have great people behind you, you can really get that second one in and feel really confident to move forward. And so I've even been changing my mind a little bit about the timeline thing. If we can make that start to work more and more often, and if, using Clo 3D and tools like that, like I think there's a shift coming in timelines for the apparel industry.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, a lot of people are starting to kind of move out of China and
Mhm.
do, like with COVID, people started doing a lot more domestic
Yes.
production. And that really speeds up the timeline too.
Yeah.
Having someone here in the United States that you can communicate with in the same time zone potentially, or just a couple hours different,
Yep.
you're getting your comments out a lot faster. They're getting it the same day. They can make those corrections and ship it back to you in a week instead of a month.
Right.
So it makes a
Yeah,
huge
you're right.
difference.
That is such a huge comment to make about it because we were manufacturing those in California, down in San Diego, and for us to be able to talk in real time with them, like even just over Slack throughout the week, was
Yeah.
really valuable. And then, yeah, their turn time and the transit time alone is really fast.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my first time working with a domestic factory, honestly, that wasn't doing blanks.
Yes.
So it was a really cool experience, and it was fun, getting to move so quickly and, walk along with them through the project instead of, emailing overnight and hoping they respond.
Waiting for a response tomorrow. And if they don't respond, then you have to follow up. Yeah, the whole rigmarole.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this is just a little bit of a tidbit of what Jessica and I have been working on together at Unmarked Street. It is seriously just such an honor to have you working with me, to have you be even associated with the brand at all. I love working with you. And
I love working with you too.
Yeah. And thank you so much for just coming on today and just sharing a little bit about what we've been doing, about your background. If you're interested in working with Jessica through Unmarked Street, you can go to unmarkedstreet.com and contact us that way. You also do some other independent contracting on your own. So if you're looking for a way to get a hold of Jessica to see if she can do a project outside of Unmarked Street, I also 100% support her in all of that work. So let me know, and I'm happy to give you her contact information.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks all. Bye.
Great to be here. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Apparel podcast. I would so appreciate hearing your thoughts on the show. And if you know someone who could benefit from it, please share it with them. My biggest desire is to help other apparel professionals understand the nuances of our industry so we can all work toward making better product for a better world. If you would like to connect further, I'd love to invite you to send me a message through my website, unmarkedstreet.com, where I do weekly trainings through my video channel, a monthly newsletter, and offer so many resources to help you start and scale a profitable apparel brand.